Growing up, I had an unhealthy obsession with Harry Potter, stemming from the books, the movies, and even to the LEGO video games. They single-handedly make up a large portion of my childhood, and since it has been a few years since I've watched the main series, I was eager to see how they have held up, in my opinion. And I'm pleased to say that rewatching them has reignited my love for this franchise. It made me really excited for this upcoming video game called Hogwarts Legacy, which is an open-world RPG, and I would have absolutely loved it when I was younger, even though I still did love those LEGO Harry Potter games. So when it comes out, I will not hesitate buying it. I got a bit sidetracked there, but the third Fantastic Beasts film has been released. This is of course being the spin-off of the Harry Potter series. I don't have as much love and nostalgia for this side franchise for obvious reasons, and it doesn't capture the same magic, pun intended, but I look at it with any time spent in this world is worth the watch for me. So with the release of this third film, Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, it gave me an excuse to watch through all the films again and relive my childhood. So in today's video, we're going to be ranking all 11 Wizarding World films from worst to best. With most sequels, you look at what went wrong in the first film and you improve upon it. However, Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald looks at what did work and focuses on what didn't work and continues to make that the main part of the story, pushing the stuff that did work to the side. This film is in such a hurry to tell this big scale story with big stakes that it never manages to take the time to find its footing. It's constantly jumping from one scene to another. Character development is put on hold in this film as there's simply no time to fit it all in. For a universe which is built around magic, this film really does not have any magic to it. It just feels like a blockbuster pumped out for money with little care taken in making it. And to be fair to him, Jude Law is a good addition to the franchise and plays this young Albus Dumbledore well. However, his screen time is severely limited as well, so we don't get much of him. Comparing this film to its predecessor, they feel leagues apart from what they're trying to achieve, as this film moves away from its actual title, Fantastic Beasts, and focuses on those connections to the Wizarding World, making it feel like an unclear mess with a lack of cohesion. To my surprise, there was actually an increase in quality here with The Secrets of Dumbledore, as it still does contain the story that Crimes of Grindelwald was trying to do. However, it does manage to make it feel like a lively world where it brings back those Fantastic Beasts elements as well as developing characters. And while it did include them and add some fun to the mix, it does bring up problems which I think they intentionally avoided in Crimes of Grindelwald, which is the balance of them, as for the majority of the runtime, some dark scenes and a dark tone, and then you'd have these fun kind of goofy scenes with these creatures. But given the way this film turned out compared to that one, I still would opt to go for this film. It's not just the balance of tone with Fantastic Beasts and the Grindelwald stuff, but there's also trying to fit in the Credence plotline as well as Mr. Kowalski's as well. But what I really enjoyed about The Secrets of Dumbledore, and what is the real reason that I'm happy that they continue this spin-off series, is it further expands the Wizarding World beyond Hogwarts and beyond what we saw in these Harry Potter films. The main stuff being that abroad, like in Germany, we got to see the German Ministry of Magic, and it really proves that this is a world that's lived in and stems past Hogwarts and that in London. While there was a lot of controversy involved, I don't really want to dive into it in this video. I did think Mads Mikkelsen was a better Grindelwald than Johnny Depp was. Johnny Depp's appearance did appear a bit cartoonish, and they went with a much more grounded approach with Mads Mikkelsen, and I thought it paid off much better, and he gave more of a menacing presence without it being cartoonish. So Mikkelsen was amongst many improvements from this film over the previous one, and part of the reason that new life has been breathed into it. I feel as though Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them does its job well. It successfully creates a spin-off which has very few ties to the Harry Potter franchise, besides the fact that it takes place in the same Wizarding world. And for the most part, it plays out differently to those films, as it focuses more on these magical creatures and the characters attempting to recapture them after they get set loose on the Wizarding world. The world is expanded upon with the looks into magic lore and what the Magic Society is like in America, and let alone the time period. For the most part though, Fantastic Beasts differs from the Harry Potter franchises when it comes to its characters. While they do have some quirks about them, especially Dan Fogler's Jacob Kowalski, for the most part they don't have as much chemistry or the same charming aspects as the trio from Harry Potter. Once this film does dwell into a larger plot and has to be told in sequels like has been happened that is where I lose interest and think his quality weakens, especially when a character like Newt Scamander doesn't need to be involved, as he's an expert with creatures, not just any general magic. Overall, this is a sweet spin-off of the Harry Potter franchise. However, I don't think it needs to be turned into this multi-film franchise of itself. I think it works well as this individual film. As I mentioned, I'm not complaining too much as we get to spend more time in the Wizarding World with its sequels. Now we have cleared the Fantastic Beasts films, we are now into the main Harry Potter franchise, and out of all of them, I think Order of the Phoenix is the weakest, while still being a good film. Up to this point, all the stories take place in Hogwarts, so seeing large portions of this film venture outside did feel very different and offered up a new, darker tone. This film acts as a transitional phase with the return of Lord Voldemort, the beginning of the end, as a lot of people say. This change in tone and structure did bring about some inconsistencies, however, mainly with time jumps and moments where it just glosses over certain things for the sake of the runtime. So it can feel a little bit rushed at points, and I get it because it's by far the longest of the Harry Potter books, but even so, it did feel like there wasn't a rush to get finished. What I really appreciate about Order of the Phoenix is how we get to develop more side characters and background characters, mainly Neville. It just makes Hogwarts feel lived in rather than it all revolving around Harry, Ron and Hermione. So having these background characters who we've seen since the first film get that screen time was quite a satisfying moment. In my life, I've always found that Order of the Phoenix was an easy last place. Here onwards, it got very tough to decide. But in this penultimate episode into the Harry Potter franchise, things are brewing and you can sense it with its dark tone, darkest to this point. This is probably the most unique in terms of plot compared to the others. However, it still does feel like it belongs within this world. Not just their adventures taking them outside of Hogwarts, but I just like seeing how Lord Voldemort's return has impacted the outside world and shown how corrupted everything has become and how damaged. For younger audiences, this may not be as an intriguing watch, as it's very dialogue heavy, very based upon characters' interactions, and basically there's not much action here and there's little time for that quirkiness that we've had before. So overall, it's quite a depressing film. I know when I was much younger, I wasn't a huge fan of it, and as I've grown up, I've enjoyed it a lot more. However, as you can see, I did enjoy the other ones a bit more than this one. But where it is more darker with these characters' tone, the depressing vibe it has, we get to see a more real feel to it, with conflicts which didn't feel forced and tacked on because of the character's age, which we'll talk about later on in this video. But what I really loved is seeing how far we have come with these characters, comparing this to Philosopher's Stone or Sorcerer's Stone, whatever you call it. They have come a long way. While we experience a lot of new things in this film, it's all leading towards the ultimate finale, which I think Deathly Hallows Part 1 does set up well. Chris Columbus brings J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World to life, and in doing so, crafted many people's childhood, mine included. On rewatch, nostalgia certainly does play a part in making this much more enjoyable, because at the centre, as it doesn't feel that natural and it skips over a lot of details just to get where it wants to. But I guess with crafting such a big world, small details can be misjudged, and it's clear that they haven't found their footing completely with this franchise. It's early days into it, and the CGI is not good by any stretch of the imagination, but like I always say with season rankings, this is the first entry and it lays strong foundations for them to be improved upon. It's a very light-hearted tone, especially compared to the later films, and I think that's perfect for what it's going for, as it's very family friendly, and as I mentioned, captured such a young audience as well. The trio of Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint and Emma Watson are so enjoyable to watch lead this film, and it's quite impressive how strong of leads they are given their age. Obviously with child actors and actresses you can nitpick certain things, but overall I thought they did a fantastic job and are a huge part of why this franchise was so successful. I enjoyed Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, hence why it's high up on this list, but I won't lie, I did remember it being a lot better. And yes, Voldemort's presence is felt throughout this whole film, despite him not having a present day appearance. But where the film let down compared to previous viewings was it did feel a bit like a sitcom for large portions of it. I did like them exploring romance, so this made the school life feel a lot more real, even though at times it was very forced. Before rewatching these films, I always remembered Harry and Dumbledore had a close relationship, but watching through them, I could never really see why I got that impression, because they would only ever interact towards the end of a film. However, here, they are heavily involved with each other for large portions, and I think it's the best development Dumbledore does get. And I should have known, because whenever someone gets more development than usual, they tend to be killed off very shortly after. Many criticise this film for its lack of urgency with its plot, and yeah, I do understand that, but I did like seeing characters being shown how they're growing up and interacting with one another. The overall tone did feel fitting for where this film was heading towards, and I think it did a solid job in its overall quality. I think nostalgia plays most part in my ranking of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, because growing up this was my favourite film and one I watched the most by far. It's another light-hearted adventure, and before this film developed into a dark franchise, this was just when they had yearly Hogwarts adventures with no Voldemort really involved. In theory, this film's tone is dark because there's possible death involved, there's petrification, I don't actually know if that's a real word, but the characters and the tone just make it a fun ride, and I guess many people might have problems with it, with its tonal inconsistency, but for me, it wasn't a problem. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but in all these films, they tend to improve upon something or expand, whether that's the whole wizarding world and the knowledge from outside of Hogwarts, as well as its darker tone. That's not really felt here yet with that dark tone. This is one of the more intriguing adventures, as it kind of plays out like a mystery, as trying to figure out what is the cause of all these people being petrified. And I'll admit, this film can drag in portions, but if you do want a film to drag within a universe, it's the Harry Potter one, as there's so much creativity involved and you can even get distracted by surrounding objects. This is a fascinating mystery with a lot of light-hearted fun. I think at the end of the day, many do kind of overlook it, so I think it is the most underrated in the entire franchise. I believe The Goblet of Fire was the first instance where we acknowledged magic outside of the bubble we've seen in the wizarding world so far. You know, we begin with the Quidditch World Cup, where we do get confirmation that there is magic in different countries, and when we get the Triwizard Tournament, we obviously have confirmation there are other magical schools. Just like with what happens with Hermione in The Prisoner of Azkaban, The Goblet of Fire does have like this sprinkle of suspicion about it, something that seems a bit off, and ultimately leads into the plot twist at the end, which does pay that off. Having that sprinkled in with the mix with the whole Triwizard Tournament that's going on made this a recipe for success. What I can praise about these films is no film feels like another one, unless you'd argue the first two. The structure here is completely different, with the whole tournament layout not playing out like a normal school year. You get the feel of a darker tone, but nothing to really cement that until the ending with Cedric Diggory's death. Mike Newell does try something with the character relationships and adding a bit of puberty conflict in there and confusion, but at the end of the day it does feel a bit forced on and unnatural. But I do respect that he was trying to make these feel like real life people. Just those sort of elements kind of come out of nowhere and feel awkward and don't really add much to the overall plot, especially with Ron and Harry's conflict. This is the first time in the Harry Potter franchise when we did drastically notice a tonal change. It's where it starts to get a little bit darker after the two light-hearted fun adventures of Philosopher's Stone and Chambers of Secrets. But this is the part where it starts to help the franchise grow to a more mature level. And it does make sense because, you know, the films kind of grow around these characters, and with them, this tonal shift does make sense. We get indications of horror with the introduction of the terrifying Dementors, who are a large portion of that dark tone, but it's also cemented home with the colour palette, where it constantly depicts things in a way which is not as colourful as before. When you think Harry Potter's third year is going to play out like the previous two in the end, with him battling the villain, along comes some shocking twists which completely divert your expectations and offer up a unique experience. This entry has surprisingly a large amount of emotion great twists, a great story, and that more mature tone, which make it my runner-up of this series. Rarely do you see a franchise reach its 8th film and still produce the best quality yet. Normally there are some drastic dips in inconsistency along the way, but this series managed to reach its finale and deliver its best entry, in my opinion. And even if they have been good all the way up to the finale, sometimes they can let down on that satisfaction. This is one of the few occasions which I can think of where finale has paid off brilliantly. Once again, it's uncharted territory for some of the things that we've seen in this film, but it just feels natural because of this world that's been so carefully crafted over these years that these films have been coming out, and not to mention growing alongside these characters. The Hunt for Horcruxes, the Battle of Hogwarts, amongst many other things, makes this such an engaging and epic conclusion, which has its moments where it pays off all the previous 7 films. When it's not blowing you away with how epic it is, there are plenty of emotions to go around, whether that's emotions of joy or sadness. Whether it's the main characters like Harry Potter himself, or characters like Neville who get their moment, it makes you so proud because you've seen them since the first film all the way to the 8th, and seeing how far they have come. This film caps off a wonderful series, if we're talking just the Harry Potter films, with no real bad quality anywhere to be seen, which started off as an innocent adventure about magic, which ended in this dark conclusion. As mentioned, I loved watching through this series once more, and it did bring back a lot of nostalgia and reignite my interest in the franchise. I hope you watching are as big of a fan as I am. In that case, I'd like to hear your ranking down below, and feel free to include the Fantastic Beasts if you want to. While you're there, please like and subscribe, it would really mean a lot, and feel free to stick around for future ranking videos, as that is what my channel is devoted to. So thank you once again for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.